Welcome to Commanders Daily, everybody. It's your one-stop shop for everything going on with the Burgundy and Gold. I'm Bob Matthews. Don't forget, hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss a day of our coverage. Commanders finishing up their practices today, getting ready to take on the Detroit Lions. 4:25 game at Northwest Stadium on Sunday. It is not the game of the week anymore. Originally, it was supposed to. Now it's the alternate game. We're getting Kenny Albert and Jonathan Vilma on the call for that one instead of Brady and Burkhardt and Kevin Burkhardt. This one is a pretty big line. As I'm recording this, the Commanders are a 9.5-point underdog at home. That's a big number in the NFL. And, considering the fact there's no Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, or Noah Brown on offense, you can understand why. This one it's going to be a tough one. There is a glimmer of hope. We're going to get to that in a second. But first off, I want to start today with a little bit of reaction to the Kurt Warner video that dropped about a day ago, talking about Jaden Daniels. If you haven't seen it, Kurt Warner does a pretty good and pretty detailed film breakdown on his YouTube channel. I highly recommend going and watching it, not just for the segment here on Jaden, but pretty much anything he does. Kurt Warner obviously is a Hall of Fame quarterback. He knows what he is talking about, and I think the things that he said were pretty insightful. When talking about Jaden's play this year, he says that the biggest thing, and he has several clips that he shows, about 30 minutes worth of film study to back it up. He talks about, how Jaden just isn't seeing the field like he was last year. And he points out a number of instances of it just from last week's game against the Seahawks. There were a number of windows. Remember earlier in the week we talked about how it didn't look to me when I watched the tape like Jaden was trusting his receivers. I think that probably plays into it a little, but obviously Kurt Warner, knowing a little bit more than I do about this kind of stuff, is able to give it a little bit more, a lot more nuance and a little bit more detail, saying that when you look at it, maybe he's not trusting his guys out there as much as he did last year for good reason, but he's also either not seeing the field or not getting the ball out as fast. And there were a number of open windows there, tight but still open, where Jaden could have let it rip. And with an arm as strong as he's got, he would have been able to make that throw. Instead, he took off running. Now, you don't know the context, and you don't know what goes on behind closed doors. But, then again, that's the nature of the beast. Why doesn't he feel like he can cut it loose like he did last year? I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he doesn't have Terry McLaurin and Noah Brown out there, who were two of his favorite targets last year. But it's also just part of the maturation process of a quarterback. We got to remember that Jaden Daniels is still only in his second year. Yeah, the game has slowed down for him, but what he's dealing with this year is a league that had an entire offseason. We talked about this in the offseason. Had an entire offseason to look at what he did, figured out what he did well, what he didn't do well. And they've been able to spend an entire offseason kind of game planning for what he didn't do well, making the adjustments. We said early on, one of Jaden's biggest challenges this year, and one of Cliff Kingsbury's biggest challenges is going to be to help Jaden make the adjustments off the adjustments that the defenses were going to make this year. And that's what there has been a little bit of a struggle with. And, the injuries, of course, have not helped things. And still, despite all of that, when you look at everything in totality, Jaden Daniels has still played fairly well. I mean, he still grades out as the best, one of the best offensive players that Washington has. If you like to go by PFF, his PFF rating, his overall offensive PFF rating is 76.7. Its passer rating is 74.9. And he's still thrown, and don't hold me to it, 12 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, or 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions through the air, something like that. not too bad. And has had a couple of games where he has looked elite. Against the Chargers, against the Giants, he's looked elite. And, even at his worst, even when he struggled this year, he's still way, way, way above average as a quarterback. So I think a lot of it is just the natural, growth process that young quarterbacks go through. He had obviously just an off the chart successful rookie season. You figured he was going to come back to the pack a little bit this year, but I have absolutely no doubt that he will make the adjustments that he needs to in the offseason and, take that leap again next year and maybe even down the stretch if they decide not to shut him down. All right, let's go on to Detroit and look at this game. As I said, Commanders still a 9.5-point home dog going into this game, which is a very big number in the NFL right now. But, there is a little bit of hope. The Lions are dealing with a few injuries as well. As a matter of fact, they got 3 guys on the offensive line, including Penei Sewell, who didn't practice yesterday. Not sure, what's going to happen today. We'll have to wait and get the injury report. But, if the Lions have an offensive line that's going to be missing 3 starters potentially, that gives the Commanders' defense, even, missing their top 3 defensive ends, it gives them a crack, a little bit of daylight there to maybe slow the Lions' offense down. Again, slowing down David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, et cetera, is going to be very hard. As a matter of fact, looking at some tape of Sam Laporta this week, wow, I think he is due. He could have a very, very big game this weekend against this Commanders defense. They've got to solve the communications problems on defense to have any hope of keeping this one close. And it sets up right now as a pretty long day. But again, it's the National Football League, and anything can happen on any given Sunday. Trite and as cliched as that is, but if the Lions don't come out with their A game, and they did lose to Minnesota last week, who knows? I'm not expecting it. If the chalk holds, this probably will be a 10 or 14-point Lions win at least, but who knows? As far as news from Ashburn, not a whole lot today. Obviously, we know Marcus Mariota is starting. Little bit of news coming out that Terry McLaurin is not going on injured reserve, and I think it was Ian Rappaport, one of the national guys, reporting that obviously not going to play this week, probably not going to play in Madrid next week against the Dolphins. Hopefully he can come back after the bye. Again, really tall order here, but theoretically, if you can figure out a way to beat the Lions, this really is a season in the balance game this week. If somehow you can figure out a way to beat Detroit, I think they're going to beat Miami next week, even going overseas. If they somehow get to stumble to the bye at 5-6, they're in it. They got a pulse. It's a faint one, but at least it's a pulse. And with, I think, 4 division games down the stretch, still theoretically anything can happen. But it's a big, big mountain to climb this week. Let us know in the comments section what you think about the game this weekend, because the next time we talk to you will be post-game on Monday. Let us know what you thought of their performance. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Hey, maybe they can keep it close. Maybe they can steal one in the fourth quarter. Commanders, Lions, 4:25 Sunday. We'll talk about it here on Monday. Like and subscribe, and like the wise man once said, if you're out on your bike tonight, as always, do wear white.